ever feel like you're kind of your own worst enemy?
Yeah.
Like you're standing in your own way? Well, Brianna Wiest's The Mountain Is You might just hold the key to understanding why.
Right.
In this deep dive, we're exploring Wiest's fascinating take on self-sabotage.
Oh.
If you've ever felt stuck battling negative patterns or just craving some serious personal growth, you're in the right place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the most intriguing things about this book is how Wiest reframes self-sabotage.
Oh, cool.
You know, we often see it as this conscious act of self-destruction.
Yeah.
But Wiest argues it's more about subconscious protection.
Okay.
Almost like our minds are building these mountains to shield us from deeper fears and unmet needs.
So it's not about intentionally messing things up,
Not really.
but more about our subconscious trying to keep us safe.
Yeah.
That's a pretty powerful shift in perspective.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Our most destructive behaviors could actually be cleverly designed to fulfill some need or soothe a part of ourselves that's been neglected. Wiest uses this fascinating anecdote about Carl Jung, you know, the famous psychologist.
Yeah.
As a kid, he wasn't a fan of school and had a tough time fitting in.
Oh.
Then, after a head injury, he started having these fainting spells. Later, he realized these spells were his way of avoiding the legitimate suffering of school.
So his mind created this physical symptom to protect him from emotional discomfort.
Exactly.
That's incredible. But does that mean we're all just walking around with these hidden triggers that could lead to self-sabotage?
Well, Wiest does point out that self-sabotage often stems from irrational fears.
Okay.
These can be fears of failure, judgment, or even success. And they become so ingrained that they control our actions even when the scenarios we fear are incredibly unlikely.
Right.
Like, let's say you have this paralyzing fear of being a passenger in a car.
Okay.
The real fear might not be about the car itself,
Right.
but about a deeper fear of losing control in other areas of your life.
So our subconscious is basically projecting that fear onto something that feels more manageable. But it keeps us stuck in the long run.
Yeah.
That's a sneaky trick.
It is, and here's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
We just dives into how negative associations often formed during childhood can fuel self-sabotage. You might have grown up observing specific behaviors or beliefs around money. Let's say you saw financial stability associated with negative traits.
Right.
Maybe based on your family dynamics or community influences.
Yeah.
That could lead to a subconscious resistance to achieving your own financial goals.
It's almost like we're inheriting these beliefs without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And then they shape our reality.
Precisely what we believe about ourselves and the world profoundly impacts how we act.
Wow.
Wiest gives a whole list of relatable everyday behaviors that could be signs of self-sabotage.
Like what?
Staying in a job you absolutely hate.
Yeah.
Constantly procrastinating on important projects. Surrounding yourself with people who drain your energy.
Right.
These are all things so many of us experience.
They seem so common. But you're saying they could actually be red flags pointing to deeper issues.
Exactly. Think of those behaviors as smoke signals.
Okay.
They might seem like isolated incidents,
Yeah.
but they could be hinting at a much bigger fire that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Staying stuck in a job you loathe might be rooted in a fear of the unknown or a fear of failure.
Makes sense.
That procrastination habit
Yeah.
could stem from a need to be perfect or a fear of judgment.
So how do we start decoding these signals
Right.
and figuring out what's really going on beneath the surface?
Well, that's where Wiest introduces one of the most empowering concepts in the book, the idea of triggers as guides.
Okay.
You see, we tend to view those negative emotions, those triggers,
Yeah.
as things to be avoided.
Yeah, we try to push them down, ignore them, or distract ourselves from them.
Exactly. But Wiest flips the script and calls them guides to freedom.
Thanks to freedom, okay.
She suggests that every single negative emotion we experience comes with a message, a piece of information that we need to decode.
So it's almost like our emotions are trying to communicate with us,
Exactly.
providing valuable feedback about our needs, desires, and boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm really intrigued by this idea. So it's not about suppressing those negative feelings,
No.
but learning to listen to them.
Absolutely. It's about shifting our perspective from seeing those feelings as enemies to seeing them as valuable messengers. Each trigger holds a unique piece of wisdom that can help us understand ourselves better and move closer to self-mastery.
This is definitely resonating with me.
Good.
I'm starting to see those negative emotions in a whole new light.
It's like our emotions are a feedback system trying to give us valuable insights, but we often miss the message because we're so busy trying to shut them down.
So how do we actually start listening to those messages?
You're right.
How do we decode what our triggers are trying to tell us?
Well, Wiest breaks down some of the most common emotional triggers and the wisdom they might hold.
Okay.
Let's take sadness, for example.
Good.
It's a natural human emotion, a healthy response to loss or disappointment. It's a crucial part of the grieving process.
But we live in a culture that often tells us to snap out of it.
Yeah.
Focus on the positive, to move on quickly.
And that's where we can get stuck.
Oh.
By denying ourselves the space to grieve, to truly feel the sadness.
Right.
We prevent the emotion from processing and releasing.
Okay.
We end up carrying that sadness with us, and it can manifest in unhealthy ways, even leading to those self-sabotaging behaviors we talked about.
So allowing ourselves to feel those difficult emotions is actually a sign of strength.
Yeah.
It's not about wallowing in sadness, but about acknowledging it and letting it run its course.
Exactly. It's about honoring our emotions, giving them the space they need to move through us.
Okay.
And this applies to so many other triggers like guilt, embarrassment, jealousy, even resentment.
I think a lot of us struggle with guilt, that feeling that we've done something wrong or let someone down.
Guilt can be a powerful motivator for change, but it can also become a heavy burden if we don't address it in a healthy way. Wiest suggests that guilt often stems from a fear of judgment, a belief that we're not good enough. And those beliefs often take root in childhood experiences. Think back to your younger self. Did you ever feel like a burden to your parents or caregivers?
You know, that's a really interesting point. I can definitely see how those early experiences can shape our sense of self-worth and contribute to feelings of guilt later in life.
It's about recognizing those patterns, those deep-seated beliefs that might be driving the guilt.
Yeah.
And challenging them with compassion and self-awareness.
Right.
And then there's embarrassment. We all make mistakes. It's part of being human.
But it's easy to let embarrassment spiral into shame.
Right.
That feeling of being inherently flawed or unworthy.
And that shame can be so destructive to our self-esteem.
Yeah, absolutely.
It often comes from a fear of judgment or rejection, like we're terrified of being seen as imperfect.
Yeah.
That fear can lead us to hide parts of ourselves, and that's when self-sabotage can creep in.
Thus, we're trying to protect ourselves from being hurt, but we end up hurting ourselves in the process.
Exactly. So it's about learning to embrace our imperfections, to be kind to ourselves when we mess up.
Okay.
It's about remembering that everyone makes mistakes, and those mistakes don't define us.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, what about jealousy?
Yeah.
I feel like that's an emotion we're often told to suppress or feel ashamed of.
It's true we often see jealousy as this negative, toxic emotion.
Right.
But Wiest suggests that jealousy can actually be a valuable guide, a pointer towards our own desires and aspirations.
So instead of judging ourselves for feeling jealous, we can use that emotion as a starting point for self-reflection.
Precisely. Let's say you're feeling jealous of a friend's success.
Oh, okay.
Instead of getting caught up in the negativity, ask yourself, what is it about their success that I admire? Is there something within me that longs for that same kind of achievement?
Yeah.
Jealousy often highlights the things we secretly want for ourselves. It can reveal our own suppressed dreams.
That's such a powerful reframe.
It is.
So instead of seeing jealousy as a threat, we can see it as an invitation to explore our own potential.
Exactly. Now let's talk about resentment.
Okay.
It's that bitter feeling we get when we feel wronged or treated unfairly.
Right.
It can be so corrosive, eating away our relationships and our inner peace.
Resentment can definitely feel like a heavy weight to carry.
It can.
What insights does Wiest offer about that emotion?
She points out that resentment often stems from unrealistic expectations. We build up these ideas in our minds about how people should behave or how situations should unfold.
Yeah.
And when reality doesn't match those expectations,
Right.
we feel resentful.
So it's about recognizing that we can't control other people or external circumstances.
Right.
We can only control our own responses.
Exactly. It's about learning to let go of those rigid expectations and embracing the reality of the situation.
Okay.
And finally, let's talk about regret. That heavy feeling of wishing we had done things differently in the past.
It's easy to get caught up in that cycle of what ifs and second guessing ourselves.
But we suggest that regret can actually be a powerful motivator for future action.
Okay.
It often highlights the things that are most important to us.
Right.
If you're carrying regret about not pursuing a certain career path or not taking that trip you always dreamed of, that regret might be a sign that it's not too late to make those dreams a reality.
So instead of letting regret paralyze us, we can use it as fuel to move forward and create a life that aligns with our true desires.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of understanding our triggers.
Yeah.
They're not there to punish us or hold us back.
Right.
They're there to guide us toward growth healing and ultimately a more fulfilling life.
It's like those triggers are signposts, pointing us in the direction of our own personal evolution.
Precisely. And by learning to listen to those signposts, we can navigate the journey with more awareness, compassion, and ultimately success.
You know, it's fascinating how we've been talking about decoding our emotions and seeing those triggers as guides.
Yeah.
But how do we actually bridge the gap between understanding those emotions and taking action? Because sometimes even when we have those insights, it can still be hard to break free from those self-sabotaging patterns.
That's a great point, and it leads us to one of the most practical concepts Wiest explores in the book.
Oh, okay.
Disconnecting action from feeling.
Okay.
You see, we often fall into this trap of waiting for the right feeling before we take action.
Right.
We wait to feel motivated, confident, or inspired. but that can keep us stuck for ages.
I think so many of us can relate to that, right? We're waiting for that surge of energy or that burst of confidence before we start working towards our goals.
Right.
But what does Wiest say about that approach?
She makes a compelling argument that those feelings often come after we take action. It's like we need to build momentum first.
Okay.
We can't just sit around waiting for the feeling to magically appear. We have to create it through action.
That reminds me of something I heard once.
What's that?
Motivation follows action, not the other way around.
Yeah.
It sounds like Wiest is echoing that idea.
Absolutely. She highlights how our feelings are often wired for comfort and familiarity.
Okay.
They want us to stay in our cozy little comfort zones, even if those zones are no longer serving us.
Right.
So any change, even positive change, can trigger resistance and discomfort at first.
So it's almost like we're programmed to resist anything new or unfamiliar, even if it's ultimately good for us.
Exactly. That's why we need to use our logic and vision to guide us, not just our emotions.
Okay.
We need to get crystal clear on what we want and why it's important to us.
Yeah.
And then we take action, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable initially.
Right.
As we start taking those steps, we begin to build momentum, and that in turn generates motivation and a sense of accomplishment.
I love that idea of creating our own motivation through action.
Yeah.
It feels so empowering.
It is.
But what about when we stumble or make mistakes along the way?
Right.
How do we deal with those moments of self-doubt and discouragement?
That's where self-compassion comes in. Wiest emphasizes the importance of being kind to ourselves, especially when we fall short of our expectations. She offers some truly powerful techniques for releasing past experiences and those unrealistic expectations we tend to carry.
I'm curious about those techniques. Could you share an example?
One technique that really stands out is the idea of re-entering painful memories and offering compassion to our younger selves.
That sounds intriguing. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Imagine you have a specific memory from your past that still carries emotional weight, something that triggers feelings of sadness, shame, or regret.
Okay.
Now visualize yourself going back to that moment, seeing yourself as you were then feeling the emotions you felt then, and as your present wiser self, offer that younger version of you compassion, understanding, and reassurance.
It's like we're giving ourselves the love and support we needed back then, but maybe didn't receive.
Exactly.
That's such a powerful concept.
Uh-huh.
Are there other techniques Wiest recommends?
Absolutely. She also talks about visualizing our highest potential future selves.
I've heard about that technique before. What's Wiest's take on it?
She suggests envisioning a future version of ourselves who has already achieved our goals, someone who embodies the qualities we aspire to cultivate.
Right.
We can then ask that future self for guidance, inspiration, and support. It's like we're tapping into our own inner wisdom and potential.
It's like giving ourselves a glimpse of what's possible, reminding ourselves that we have the power within to create that future.
Yeah.
That's so inspiring.
It is. And another important piece Wiest emphasizes is the need to release emotional backlog.
Okay.
It's like we all carry around this backlog of unresolved emotions from our past.
Right.
She suggests finding healthy ways to process and release those emotions, whether through journaling, talking to a trusted friend, or engaging in creative expression.
That makes so much sense. We can't just ignore those emotions and expect them to go away on their own.
Right.
We have to find constructive ways to process them so they don't keep us stuck.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Wiest challenges the conventional idea of a glow-up.
Yeah.
Could you tell me more about that?
You know, we often see a glow up as this purely external transformation, getting that perfect body, landing the dream job, finding the ideal partner.
Right.
But Wiest argues that true transformation goes much deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's about inner work, about cultivating self-acceptance and authenticity.
So it's not about seeking external validation or trying to prove something to the world,
Yep.
but rather about finding that sense of peace and wholeness within ourselves.
Exactly. She uses this powerful analogy of a mountain. She says the mountain is you. It represents those obstacles, challenges, and limiting beliefs that are keeping us from reaching our full potential.
Okay.
And the journey to self-mastery isn't about conquering that mountain by force,
Right.
but about understanding it, accepting it, and climbing it with compassion.
I love that imagery. So it's about facing those fears, acknowledging our strengths,
Yeah.
and embracing that journey of growth and evolution.
Precisely. And one of the most important steps in that journey is learning to trust ourselves again.
Okay.
Wiest talks about cultivating inner peace,
Yeah.
that deep knowing that everything is okay and always will be.
That sounds so incredibly peaceful, especially in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain.
It is.
How do we tap into that inner peace?
She suggests shifting our focus from chasing happiness,
Right.
which can be fleeting and conditional, to cultivating inner peace, which is much more stable and enduring. She encourages aligning our goals with our values, practicing gratitude, and letting go of the need to control everything.
So it's about surrendering to the flow of life, trusting that we're exactly where we need to be, and finding peace in the present moment.
Yes. And she also offers a ton of practical advice on how to infuse more joy and fulfillment into our everyday lives.
Like what?
She encourages us to stop trying to assert dominance in relationships, to savor those little joys, to nurture positive connections, and to carve out time for play and relaxation.
It's about creating a life that's truly aligned with our hearts, filled with things that bring us joy, and surrounded by people who lift us up.
And here's one final nugget of wisdom from Wiest that I find particularly impactful.
Okay.
She reminds us to be mindful of what we give our energy to. Our thoughts and beliefs have an incredible power to shape our reality, so we need to be very conscious of what we're focusing on and feeding.
It's like we have a choice. We can choose to dwell in fear and negativity, or we can choose to cultivate love, growth, and expansion. It all comes down to making conscious choices that align with our highest selves.
You've got it. The Mountain Is You truly offers a compelling roadmap for understanding and overcoming self-sabotage so you can live a more fulfilling life.
Yeah.
It's a must-read for anyone feeling stuck, lost, or simply yearning to live a more intentional and authentic life.
It sounds like this book is packed with insights and actionable advice that can benefit anyone on their personal growth journey. I know I'm definitely adding it to my reading list.
And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. Be kind to yourself along the way and celebrate every step you take towards self-mastery.
This deep dive has been such an insightful exploration of Brianna Wiest's The Mountain Is You. It's given us so much to think about and apply to our own lives.
It has.
This podcast is brought to you by The Growth Reads, TGR.
Okay.
Listen to TGR on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music. Visit us at thegrowthreads.com. The Growth Reads is your go-to channel for personal development through the power of books each week. We dive deep into insightful reads that foster personal and professional growth sharing, key takeaways, thought-provoking discussions, and actionable advice.